Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here today. I believe it's no accident you showed up. I believe God brought you here for a reason. You see, there are moments in life when the greatest power we can show is restraint. Sometimes the best thing we can do in a situation isn't to speak louder, argue harder, or prove our point. Is to zip our mouth and let peace do the talking. We live in a world that tells us to clap back, to have the last word, to always speak our mind. But I found, and maybe you have too, that some of our biggest breakthroughs come not when we shout, but when we stay silent. Today I want to talk to you about the strength in self-control, the wisdom in silence, and the blessing that comes when we choose not to say everything we feel. Because sometimes your silence is not weakness, it's wisdom, it's faith, it's power under control. So buckle up, because this message could just change the way you walk into your next conversation, and maybe even change the course of your life. Silence isn't weakness, it's strength under control. This idea might go against what many of us have been taught. We live in a world that praises the loudest voice, the quickest comeback, the boldest opinion. But there's a quiet power in restraint, in knowing you could say something and choosing not to. It's not about being passive, it's about being wise. It's about having the maturity to understand that every battle isn't worth fighting, every insult isn't worth a reply, and every opinion doesn't need to be voiced. When someone says something offensive, something that cuts deep, the natural reaction is to defend ourselves, to fire back. That's our pride talking. That's our ego stepping up, saying, you can't let them talk to you like that. But the truth is, real strength isn't in reacting. It's in rising above. It takes more courage to stay silent than it does to lash out. Anyone can argue. Anyone can shout. But it takes character to stay composed, to be still and let your silence speak for you. Think about a lion. A lion doesn't need to roar every time it walks into the room. It knows who it is. It doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. That's the kind of strength we're talking about. The kind that comes from confidence, not insecurity. When you truly know your worth, you don't need to explain yourself to everybody. You don't have to respond to every critic, answer every accusation, or justify every move. Sometimes silence is your best defense. Now, I'm not saying we should never speak up. There are moments when your voice matters, when your words can bring healing, bring truth, bring change. But there's a difference between speaking from purpose and reacting from emotion. Too often we confuse the two. We think every feeling needs a microphone, every frustration needs a platform. But feelings are fleeting, words once spoken are permanent. You can't take them back. That's why silence in the heat of the moment is a sign of wisdom. It gives you time to cool down, to gain perspective, to choose your words with intention. There's a story in the Bible about Jesus standing before his accusers. They hurled insults at him. They mocked him. They demanded answers. And yet the scripture says he opened not his mouth. Think about that. The Son of God, full of power and authority, could have silenced them all with one word. But he didn't. He chose silence. Not because he was weak, but because he was strong. Because he was focused on a higher purpose. He wasn't distracted by the noise of the moment. He knew that silence in that situation was the greatest display of strength. In our lives, there will always be people who misunderstand us, who talk behind our backs, who try to stir conflict. And the temptation will always be there to defend ourselves, to set the record straight. But sometimes the best thing you can do is zip your mouth and let God be your defender. He sees what they said. He knows what they did. And he knows how to handle it far better than we do. If you'll stay in peace, stay silent, and stay focused, he'll take care of the rest. Holding your tongue doesn't mean you're letting people walk over you. It means you're choosing peace over chaos, wisdom over impulse. And that's not weakness, that's real strength. People may not understand it. They may think you're afraid or timid, but you know better. You know that zipping your mouth isn't about fear, it's about faith. Faith that the truth will come out in time. Faith that you don't need to fight every battle. Faith that your silence, grounded in strength, will speak louder than any argument ever could. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Life is full of invitations to conflict, some subtle, some loud, some coming from people we love and others from complete strangers. But just because someone throws bait at you doesn't mean you have to bite. Just because someone is looking for a reaction doesn't mean you have to give them one. It's not your job to show up to every disagreement, every confrontation, every moment of tension with your sleeves rolled up, ready to go. You have the power to choose where your energy goes, and sometimes walking away is the most powerful response you can give. People will test you. They will push buttons, stir emotions, bring drama right to your doorstep. Not because you're weak, but because they see your strength. And they want to pull you into their storm. But here's what you've got to remember. When you stay calm in the face of chaos, you're not giving in, you're rising above. It's easy to respond when someone says something rude. It's easy to react when someone misjudges you. But the stronger move, the wiser move, is to recognize that not every comment deserves a reply. Not every jab needs a counter. Not every situation is worth your peace. There's a spiritual maturity that comes with knowing when to stay silent, when to turn away, and when to simply say, I'm not going to go there. It's not about avoiding confrontation. It's about protecting your spirit. It's about knowing that your joy, your focus are too valuable to waste on arguments that don't lead anywhere. Most arguments don't end in resolution. They end in bitterness and hard feelings and broken connections. And many times the argument you walked into wasn't even about you. It was about the other person's pain, insecurity, or bad day. But if you're not careful, you'll let someone else's storm drag you under. You'll get caught in their emotional current. And before you know it, you're saying things you regret, feeling drained and wondering how you got pulled in. You don't have to play defense all day. You don't have to constantly prove you're right, that your intentions were pure, that your side makes sense. When you really know who you are, when you're grounded in purpose, you don't have to explain yourself to every critic. You don't have to show up to every debate just because someone expects you to. You can smile, walk away, and keep your peace intact. That's not being passive, that's being powerful. That's choosing your battles wisely. Jesus himself modeled this time and time again. He didn't argue with the Pharisees every time they tried to trap him. He didn't respond to every accusation, every whisper of criticism. He didn't feel the need to win the argument because he was focused on winning the war. And that's how we should live too, not obsessed with winning every debate, but committed to winning the bigger battles of life. The battle to stay in peace. The battle to keep our hearts clean. The battle to maintain healthy relationships and a clear conscience. When someone says something hurtful, there's a moment when your pride wants to rise up. It says, don't let them get away with that. Set them straight. Put them in their place. But if you listen to that voice, you'll get caught in a cycle of constant reaction. You'll find yourself living at the mercy of other people's words. And the more you react, the more power you give them. But when you learn to decline those invitations to argue, take your power back. You stay in control. You stay focused on your purpose. There's an old saying, you don't have to attend every fight you're invited to. It sounds simple, but it's profound. Just because someone throws negativity your way doesn't mean you have to pick it up and carry it. You can let it fall. You can walk around it. You can keep going. People may not understand why you don't respond. They may think you're avoiding the issue or that you're too soft. But the truth is, you're strong enough to know what's worth your energy and what's not. You're wise enough to know that peace is worth more than proving a point. You're mature enough to know that some arguments, no matter how tempting, just aren't worth your time. God fights your battles better than your words ever could. When we face conflict, betrayal, or injustice, our first instinct is often to step in and defend ourselves. We want to make things right, set the record straight, prove our innocence, or fight to get what we feel we deserve. But the truth is, there are battles we're not meant to fight with our own strength, our own voice, or our own strategy. Some battles belong to God. And when we try to take over what's His, we often make things worse. We speak in anger, we react in frustration, we move in fear. And before long, we're tangled up in a mess that could have been avoided if we had simply stepped back and trusted Him. There's something powerful about surrendering the fight. It doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're giving it over. You're putting it into hands that are stronger, wiser, and more capable than yours. God sees what's happening behind closed doors. He hears the words that were spoken when you weren't in the room. He knows the truth, even when others twist it. And if you'll let Him, He will fight for you in ways you never could on your own. He will bring justice when it's due, vindication when it's needed, and peace that surpasses all understanding. Many times we think silence is weakness. We think not defending ourselves is foolish. But in reality, it's faith. It's a quiet declaration that says, I don't have to win this battle. I don't have to prove my worth. I know who I am, and I know who my defender is. It's not easy. Everything in you wants to step in. Everything in you wants to fight. But there's a deeper strength in saying, God, I trust you. I trust you to handle this better than I ever could. Look at the story of Moses standing before Pharaoh. Moses wasn't a polished speaker. He even told God he wasn't eloquent. Yet God didn't need his perfect words. He needed his obedience. And when Moses stood in silence, God moved in power. God sent plagues, parted seas, and delivered a nation. All because someone chose to trust Him over their own ability. That's what happens when we let God fight our battles. He does things we couldn't imagine. He opens doors we couldn't unlock. He shuts mouths we couldn't silence. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is restraint. When you want to speak up, but you stay silent. When you want to retaliate, but you show kindness instead. When you want to get even, but you choose to forgive. That's not weakness. That's strength rooted in trust. Trust that God sees, God knows, and God is working behind the scenes on your behalf. And when He moves, there will be no doubt about who brought the victory. It's not your job to convince everyone of your value. It's not your assignment to chase down every rumor, respond to every critic, or explain every decision. That's exhausting. That will drain your joy, your peace, and your purpose. But when you learn to let God do the talking, when you allow Him to move in your situation, you'll see results that your words could never accomplish. He'll change hearts. He'll open minds. He'll deal with the people who tried to come against you in ways that leave no room for retaliation. You may not see it right away. It may look like the other person is getting ahead, that they're winning, that they're getting away with what they did. But God is not blind. He is not asleep. He is not passive. He is a just God. He keeps records. And at the right time, in the right way, He will step in and turn the situation around. Your part is to stay in peace, stay in faith, and stay out of the way. Don't try to manipulate it. Don't try to rush it. Just trust that if God brought you to it, He will bring you through it. And He will do it better than you ever could. When you live with this kind of trust, you walk differently. You don't feel the need to control every outcome. You don't let every offense take root in your heart. You don't let negativity pull you off course. Instead, you rise above it. You keep your head up. You keep moving forward knowing that the God who called you is also the God who covers you. He fights for His children. He defends the faithful. He protects those who trust in Him, and He always has the final say. Peace often enters through a closed mouth. In a world that constantly encourages us to speak our minds, share our opinions, and react in real time, the idea of keeping silent feels unnatural. But silence can be sacred. It can be a door through which peace walks in and fills the room. When we choose not to speak in moments of anger, tension, or pride, we create space for something greater than our emotions. We create space for peace to settle in, to calm the storm before it even begins. There are moments when words can't fix what's broken, moments when explanations only add fuel to the fire, when trying to be heard only increases the noise. In those moments, a closed mouth isn't just wise, it's powerful. It's a deliberate act of surrender. an invitation for peace to take control where chaos once ruled. We've all been in situations where we said something we didn't mean. Words spoken in frustration and defense in the heat of the moment. And afterward, we feel the weight of regret. We wish we had paused, waited, chosen silence instead. Choosing not to speak doesn't mean we don't have something to say. It means we value the outcome more than the outburst. It means we're not letting our emotions lead the way. We're letting wisdom take the wheel. There is a peace that comes when you decide that every battle doesn't need a voice, that every comment doesn't deserve a comeback, that sometimes silence is your strongest statement. In a heated argument, it's easy to keep pushing, to keep raising your voice, trying to make your point. But rarely does that lead to resolution. More often it leads to hurt feelings, broken trust, and emotional exhaustion. But if just one person in that moment decides to stay quiet, to listen instead of speak, everything shifts. The atmosphere softens, the tension begins to ease, and peace finds its way in. That one decision to zip your mouth can be the key to protecting a relationship, diffusing conflict, or preventing words you can't take back. Jesus modeled this kind of peace-filled silence when he stood before Pilate. Being accused, mocked, and misunderstood, he remained silent. He didn't defend himself, even though he had every right to. He didn't try to argue his innocence or lash out at the injustice. Instead, he trusted the Father and he chose silence. That silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was focus. It was an unshakable peace rooted in knowing who he was and whose he was. We often think peace comes after the problem is solved, after the situation calms down, after the person apologizes. But real peace isn't external, it's internal. It's not about what's happening around you, it's about what's happening within you. And one of the fastest ways to preserve that inner peace is through restraint. When you feel the urge to speak, to correct, to respond, and you instead take a deep breath and say nothing, you're choosing to protect your peace. There's wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to be silent. Some of the most peaceful moments in life come not when you say the right thing, but when you choose not to say anything at all. You could argue, you could correct, you could demand. But instead, you sit quietly, you pray, you wait. You let God work on your behalf. And in doing so, you allow peace to take root in your heart and in your home. You don't always have to speak to be understood. You don't always have to explain yourself to be at peace. Sometimes your quiet confidence says more than 1,000 words ever could. Silence can be a shield. It can be a sanctuary. It can be the space where healing begins. When you choose to close your mouth, you open the door for peace to come in, not just to the moment, but to your mind, your spirit, your relationships. We all face situations where it feels like we have to speak up to protect ourselves, to fix something, to make someone see our side. But if you look back at your life, you'll notice that some of the most painful words you ever spoke came from a place of urgency, of needing to be right, of needing to be heard. And if we could go back, we wouldn't add more words, we'd take some away. We'd choose stillness. We'd choose patience. We'd choose peace through a closed mouth. What you don't say can save relationships, careers, and peace of mind. We're often told to speak up, to voice every bold with our opinions. But there's a wisdom in restraint that often goes unnoticed. Some of the biggest regrets people carry aren't about what they failed to say, but about the words they did say in haste and anger without considering the long-term impact. Words are powerful, and once released, they can't be taken back. They linger in hearts, echo in minds, and can either build or break. That's why what you choose not to say is just as important, if not more, than what you do say. There are moments in life when holding your tongue is an act of love, when choosing not to respond is a gift you give not just to someone else, but to yourself. In an argument, in a heated meeting, in a difficult conversation, your silence can be the very thing that keeps a relationship intact. It's not about suppressing your truth, but about choosing the right time, the right tone. And sometimes choosing not to say anything at all, because saying it won't help, it will only hurt. The right words at the wrong time can do damage. But silence, when motivated by wisdom and patience, can protect what matters most. Relationships are delicate. They're built on trust, respect, and understanding. And sometimes one careless phrase can undo what took years to build. A moment of sarcasm, a harsh response, an impulsive remark, these things can leave deep wounds. But when you practice the discipline of holding back, when you pause instead of reacting, when you choose peace over pride, you give the relationship room to grow instead of letting it crack under pressure. You might feel the need to win the argument, to make your point known, to speak your mind, but sometimes silence is what keeps love from turning into resentment. In professional life, this principle holds even more weight. One poorly chosen comment in a meeting, one email written in frustration, one outburst in front of the wrong person, these things can cost you opportunities, credibility, and peace of mind. There's a reason people are taught to pause before replying, to breathe before reacting. In the workplace, what you don't say can be your greatest asset. It can show emotional intelligence, maturity, and leadership. Being able to stay calm, to listen without interrupting, to not always have the last word, that's not weakness. That's strength. That's someone others can trust, can work with, can follow. And then there's the peace of mind that comes from self-control. When you know you didn't say something you would regret. When you walk away from a tough conversation without adding fuel to the fire, there's a calm that follows. You don't lie awake at night replaying your words, wishing you had stayed quiet. You don't have to go back and apologize for what you said in the heat of the moment. You don't carry the burden of causing pain with your tongue. Peace of mind is one of the greatest rewards of choosing silence over impulse, and that peace is priceless. There are people right now dealing with broken friendships, damaged families, and strained marriages, not because they didn't speak up, but because they didn't know when to stay quiet. Not because they lacked opinions, but because they didn't use discretion. We've all been in situations where the right thing to say was nothing at all, where silence could have spared someone's feelings, could have diffused a conflict, could have turned an argument into a moment of grace. It's in those moments we realize the true value of what we don't say. Holding your tongue doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to protect what's valuable. It means you're not controlled by every thought or emotion that runs through your mind. It means you've learned to pause, to weigh your words, to understand that not everything needs to be spoken. In that space between what you feel and what you say, there's room for wisdom to rise. And in that wisdom, you'll find preservation of your peace, your reputation, your relationships. There's incredible strength in being slow to speak. It's not about silence for silence's sake. It's about knowing that what you don't say can often speak louder than anything you could say. It shows you've mastered your emotions, that you're not driven by pride or insecurity, but by a desire to do what's right, even when it's hard. And in doing so, you protect the very things that matter most. When emotions are high, wisdom is usually low. In the heat of the moment, when your heart is pounding and your thoughts are racing, it becomes very easy to say something you'll later wish you hadn't. That's because intense emotions cloud judgment. They hijack reason. They blur the line between truth and assumption, between helpful and harmful. When you're angry, offended, or overwhelmed, it feels natural, even necessary, to speak up immediately. But what feels right in the moment often turns out to be the very thing that creates regret down the road. Wisdom doesn't thrive in emotional chaos. It waits. It listens. One of the greatest indicators of emotional maturity is the ability to pause. Not everything needs a response right away. Not every text message deserves an instant reply. Not every rude comment requires a rebuttal. When your emotions are stirred up, the first thing you should do is step back, not forward, because your first words are rarely your wisest words. What you say in anger, you may spend days, months, even years trying to repair. But if you can learn to pause, to process, to pray, You give wisdom the space it needs to rise to the surface. Emotions aren't wrong, they're part of how we're wired. They can alert us to danger, reveal our values, and guide our empathy. But they're not meant to lead our decisions. Emotions are signals, not steering wheels. If you let anger drive the conversation, it'll crash into pride. If you let frustration lead the way, it'll swerve into misunderstanding. But when wisdom is in charge, peace follows, resolution follows, growth follows. And often, that only happens when you learn to wait for your emotions to settle before you speak. People will say things that get under your skin. Life will bring moments that don't feel fair. Sometimes you'll be disrespected, overlooked, misjudged. The temptation in those moments is to react, to clap back, to raise your voice, to get the last word. But reacting out of emotion often causes more harm than good. It may feel satisfying in the short term, but it rarely solves the problem. In fact, it usually escalates it. When you let your emotions speak for you, you might win the argument but lose the relationship. You might prove your point but damage your integrity. Wisdom doesn't ignore emotions, it masters them. It knows how to sit with anger without acting out of it. It knows how to feel deeply but respond carefully. That kind of wisdom isn't developed in easy moments, it's forged in the hard ones. In the moments when everything in you wants to explode, but you choose to hold your tongue. In the moments when you could lash out, but you choose patience instead. Every time you choose to pause, you build strength. Every time you resist the urge to speak from a wounded place, you make room for healing. Proverbs says that a fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise person quietly holds it back. That doesn't mean you pretend nothing's wrong. It means you deal with what's wrong in the right way. It means you recognize that your words have power, and you don't want to use that power to tear down what you might later want to rebuild. The right time, the right tone, the right words, those are the tools of wisdom. And those tools are often unreachable when emotions are leading the charge. Think of the damage that's been done in families and friendships and marriages, in workplaces, not because people didn't care, but because they spoke from a place of unchecked emotion. One moment of rage can undo years of trust. One sarcastic jab in a tense conversation can create a wound that words can't easily heal. But what if we became people who knew how to pause? Who knew how to wait for clarity before speaking? Who weren't afraid of silence if it meant saving something sacred? In that pause, there is power. Power to reflect, to pray, to seek perspective. Power to ask yourself, is this worth saying? Will it help or hurt? Am I speaking from pain or from purpose? That space between the emotion and the expression is where transformation happens. It's where wisdom whispers the better way. And often, that whisper gets drowned out when we speak too soon, too loud, too fast. Learning to zip your mouth in emotional moments doesn't mean you're weak or passive. It means you've learned that wisdom isn't impulsive, it's intentional. It's thoughtful. It's guided by the long view, not the short fuse. The more you practice this, the more peace you'll carry. The more respect you'll earn. The more bridges you'll preserve rather than burn. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it.